today we are going to be talking about the Standard and Indicator 2D Managing Student Behavior. And today joining me is Miss Kelly Wood. She is part of our CTE program with Virtual Arkansas, and she teaches anatomy and physiology as one of her courses, and she also teaches one of our CTE medical courses. And my name is Kirsten Wilson. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and we're just going to go through and just kind of talk about how she manages student behavior in an online environment. And so we hope as you listen to what Kelly does and the strategies she does that you'll see some certain components that help teachers to have a great online learning environment when it comes to managing student behavior.
The key to that is to give the expectations from the very beginning. And so we set up Zoom procedures. We discuss those in our collaborative teams with our PLCs, talking about what our procedures should be, what's the standard, what do we want from our students, and then we put those in our orientation module that all students go through to make sure that they understand what the expectations are on the front end on that, as well as we discuss those procedures in the very first Zoom meetings with students. We go over them, we practice how to use our mute buttons and how to do all of this stuff at the very beginning so that everyone's clear on the expectations and on how to behave toward the classmates and toward the teacher and in the setting where they are, because it's a little bit different. And for some students, it's totally new and it's fun. And we see each other and they can see each other on the screen. And so the very first session, we may even play with it just for a second, like, okay, get this out of your system now, wave at everybody, get this out of your system. We all look like the Brady Bunch. Now let's get down to business, and we don't have to do that anymore. So that's some of the ways that we do that.
Very good. I do have a question, because from time to time we get students in the midst of learning, not right at the beginning of the year. How do you and your colleagues and maybe even your students help students that come in after those initial meetings where you first talked about those procedures?
Well, if we have a new student coming in, as an instructor, I want to first welcome them. And I know you're new to this class and you're new to Zoom, and this is all fresh for you, and your fellow students here know how to use this, but let's that the fellow students a lot of times will jump in and help them as well. I'll just do a quick, when you come in, just be sure and put your mic on mute, and here's the chat button at the bottom right down here, and this is where you may answer questions, and then as we go through, they pick it up. We don't do an in-depth, but then I can refer them back as well to make sure that you've gone through your Zoom procedures, and if you have any questions, we can do a one-on-one. One of the first things, and this may not fit in this category, but is to try to find times that work for my students so that they're not absent from Zoom sessions any more than they have to be. So we use a system where we do something called entry ticket when they enter the class. And so they give us information about what their school schedule is like and when they're available to come to Zooms. And I try to schedule around that as much as I possibly can. Then I send out reminders on Zoom days to please come to, today is Zoom day. Remember, today is Zoom day. I do flipped classroom activities, like in my announcement that reminds them of Zoom. Before you come, be sure you have, watch this video snippet or read this article, and we're going to discuss it. It gives them a little bit of buy-in so that they have put in some time and they're ready to come in and discuss it, and they don't feel like they're uncertain of what's expected of them when they get to Zoom. So it takes out that uncertainty, which helps with behaviors too, because they're not unsure of what to do. As far as attendance, I have attendance link that I use to track attendance, and that is like a Google form that all they have to do is go in and put their name in, and it tracks the times and stuff, and it takes out having to take attendance for students and allows me to track how many times they're coming. For Zoom meeting activities, I'll do things like having them answer questions aloud in chat. They can choose to answer in chat privately to me if they're uncertain. I do a lot of poll activities in Zoom where I'll create it ahead of time and use that as an entry ticket to get them going. And I'm always sure to tell them at the beginning that polls, I can't tell who answers what. And so that makes them more apt to answer and not just sit back and be scared to say because they're afraid everyone's going to know they don't know the answer. So when I show them the result, I show them this is exactly what I see. I see what percentage of you answer a certain way, and it helps me know which way to go with instruction today. And so we talk about that. I guess that's pretty much it. You cannot be physically close to a student in an online environment, but you can stay engaged with them during a Zoom session. You can send them even a private chat if something's going on during a Zoom session. So that's one way that you can do that as well.
Well, and it seems like those polls, even though you can't figure out who answered it, that gives you a really good guideline about how to give instruction during that particular Zoom. And so students feel like their time is valued because you're not doing a one-size-fits-all. You're really trying to direct instruction for that particular group during that particular Zoom. And students will then value that Zoom session with that much more, which helps with attendance. And then also they're listening for the answer, so their behavior and attentiveness is going to be a positive as well. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. One thing is that everyone enters on mute. I usually tell them a humorous story at the beginning of the year about a student who did not and things that were said. And, we always want to enter on mute. Students actually, they remind each other of this. They self-monitor on this. If someone comes in and they're not on mute, another student will most of the time send them a chat. I don't even have to. They'll send a chat and say, hey, you're not on mute. And so they kind of self-regulate on that. I allow them to log in with their preferred name along with their school because, many of them don't want to be called Bernice and they have a middle name that they go by. And so they log in with their preferred name in school and that makes it a little bit better so they don't feel like they're being teased about a name or something like that. Private chat in Zoom settings, that's turned off for everyone except me. So they can private chat me, I can private chat them, but they're not allowed to private chat each other, which is pretty big. Don't want that to happen. When they answer a question, I allow them to answer directly to me. If they don't feel comfortable answering to everyone, they can answer directly to me, and that's not a problem. Or they can unmute and answer aloud. So some people like to hear their voice, and others like to answer in chat. And if I have one that's monopolizing the Zoom session, which will happen as well, then it's pretty easy to say, okay, now let's everyone turn on mute, and everyone's going to answer in chat. Just to make sure that everyone feels the ability to engage or to answer. And I've been known to mute a student if they don't mute themselves. I have the teacher control button that I can mute a student when that's appropriate. If it really gets bad, which has been extremely rare in the years that I've taught, I have had to remove maybe 2 students from Zoom sessions in the entire time that I've taught because most really do quite well. But you can actually remove a student, and there's a setting where they're not allowed back into that session, and then I can communicate with them later on what's going on. Most of the time, if I have someone who's not fully engaged and they're disrupting a bit, I'll say something to them at the end of the Zoom session like, hey, would you mind staying back and let's talk about an assignment? I have a question about one of your answers on an assignment, so that nobody else knows why they're staying back, and then that person and I can have a one-on-one conversation about, I know this is entertaining and it's fun, but, we have to follow certain guidelines and not embarrass them in front of their peers, but still get that point across to them. And if that doesn't work, then of course there's other steps, and we'll talk to the facilitator and go to the school, to discuss that.
Very good. It sounds like there's a lot of strategies that you utilize, and I'm sure that a lot of those ideas were ideas that were part of working with your collaborative team. Tell me a little bit about that.
we do share information in collaborative team, and engagement, Zoom engagement activities are always a big part of what we talk about. How do you get your students interested? How do you keep your students interested? What kind of techniques are you using? And that's part of our formal and informal conversations in our collaborative team. Is how to do that, and what's working for me, and here's a new technique I found. Let me show you how to do it. So we do that in collaborative teams. We certainly do.
Well, and then not only do your students benefit, but the students that your colleagues have benefit from that as well. And then you're not all by yourself trying to come up with ideas. You can borrow from other people, and sometimes you may have an effective strategy, but someone else is doing something that's even more effective. And so that constant sharing helps you guys really work towards designing and managing student behavior in such a way that it takes a positive approach and it doesn't seem like a burden.
True. And sometimes you get into a rut using the same, you find something that works, and so you use it a lot. And so hearing perspective from your colleagues can give you a new push to try something different.
Absolutely, and that variety is really essential to managing student behavior too, because when you get in a rut, they tend to tune out. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. Sometimes you feel like you need to dance on one foot and wave a flag to keep people engaged, but for the most part, students do quite well.
Very good. Well, Ms. Wood, I really appreciate you meeting with us this morning and talking about the standard and indicator 2D, managing student behavior and tests. And you've really given us a lot to think about and ways that we can coach and support our teachers that are teaching either in a blended or online environment. So thank you so much, and have a great day. In this last session, when I talked with Ms. Wood about the standard and indicator 2D, managing student behavior, it was very evident how important it is that she works with her PLC in order to share ideas and strategies, which is an indicator in the standard as distinguished. She also was very clear about her standards and communicated those well, which we know is something that a proficient teacher does, but she does it in such a way that the students embrace it. It's not just something that is shared, but it is actually followed through with. And then there was a comment about how she doesn't even have to have students monitor, or she doesn't have to monitor the behavior, but students help her facilitate or monitor behavior and check on one another, which is another area that shows that she's distinguished in the area of online instruction. Teacher response to behavior is also appropriate and effective. She talked about that many times students self-regulate, but in situations that occur, she has ways to address that behavior, either asking a student to stay behind in a way that they aren't feeling like they are being shamed in front of others, and then addressing that behind the scenes, or in extreme cases, excluding the student from Zoom for that particular session and then following up with that student and addressing that concern. In many ways, the conversations that we had and what was shared with Ms. Wood, she is what we would call a proficient to distinguished teacher in the area of 2D, manage student behavior. I hope that this helps you as you coach your teachers and help guide them as they develop some very important strategies and techniques for managing student behavior in regards to standard and indicator 2D and tests.